everybody. Hi. Welcome. Hi, all. Welcome. Hey, everybody.
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
How's it going?
Hanging in there. It's a beautiful day outside, so I'll take that.
I am here outside as well. Can you hear me
Okay.
okay? Not like too
Yeah.
much other noise.
No, it's okay. I mean, if anybody watching ends up having any trouble hearing, feel free to put in a comment and we can adjust as needed. Um, for anybody who is joining us, I pinned our little comment down at the bottom, but it's our weekly Slow.Look.Live kind of chance to reflect on the moment that we're in and the places that we're in. And I am joined today by Blake Paskal, who is an artist, educator, activist, kind of multi hyphenate in Brooklyn, New York. And so if you do have just a bit of housekeeping, if you do have questions or comments that you want to type into the comment feed, I'll keep an eye on them as we have our conversation going on, and you can chime in. But I guess I wonder, Blake, if you want to start out by kind of introducing how you see your work. Like that was a little bit of me giving like a one sentence summary about it. But if you want to kind of introduce how your different parts of your work kind of connect, maybe that's a good way to start us off.
Sure. So hello everybody. I am an artist, museum educator, programmer, like doing programming work. With some activism interlaid as well. And so I was trained as an artist, trained as a sculptor, but since undergrad, I have been moving through the art world in a variety of different ways. Have taught at the Guggenheim, at the Studio Museum in Harlem. I now work at Visual AIDS, which is an organization based in Chelsea, New York, that supports artists living with HIV, preserves the legacies and histories of artists that passed during the height of the AIDS epidemic. And so I do programming work with them. I have, and then, yeah, so that's where the activism kind of comes in a little bit as well, that, of course, we're standing up and supporting artists living with HIV, educating people about HIV, the fact that it's still very much ongoing and persistent. And yeah, so I would say that's, the majority of my work. As a visual artist, there's been like some back and forth that maybe like we'll get into a little bit, that I've like, especially here in New York, it's hard to ground yourself and establish yourself, and particularly as a sculptor, trying to find the space in which to work is challenging. So I'm kind of coming back around to getting into my artistic practice in a way that I kind of like had to walk away from it for a bit, but yeah.
I guess because that was one of the things that we had talked about in leading up to this conversation, was sort of you feeling like you want to wait until you've got sort of a clear vision of what you're trying to express,
Mm-hmm.
before you head into making a new piece of art. And it was really interesting to hear you kind of reflecting on the fact that like that was a motivator for you to step away, was not feeling like you had kind of a clear idea of what you wanted to express, but that maybe you're coming back into that now. Is that, am I saying that accurately, or
Yeah, I would say some of
you
that.
want to?
Um, I So yeah, as a queer Black person who identifies as non-binary and coming to understand my own identity, that is something that has definitely like unpacking the layers of how I experience the world, and gaining comfort in that has been quite a journey over the past couple years, and I feel like I'm just getting to a moment where I can like sit with all of these things and like and I know what I want to make art about. So I actually feel like quite okay about not having been as productive as you know might not as it might appear on the surface, but there all the gears are turning, and I feel like I'm learning what I really want to focus on with my art, and all of these things that I've been involved with museum education, with the activism, they all inform each other.
Yeah, and I was kind of curious about that because I feel like when you say you haven't been that productive, it's like I feel like I know of so much that you've been doing in the last few years, and like maybe it's not making art in that kind of traditional sense or
Yeah.
in the sculpture sense, but I feel like it's an interesting moment, especially throughout the last several months with the pandemic, let alone our current kind of climate of social protest and uprising. But it's like, what does productivity look like? And I
Yeah.
feel like you, of all people, are someone that I think of as having like multiple avenues of what that productivity might look like. So do you feel like if you don't feel like you've been very productive in your art making, where do you feel like you have been more productive, or what's helping you figure out some of these pieces of identity and expression that you
hmm um, well, yeah, definitely, like as I said, understanding my own identity as well, and um, we or yeah, so we had talked about the some or I guess the some reading that I've been doing lately has been one thing that's really helped me get grounded, um, and also like at looking to different forms of leadership too, I would say, really like valuing and recognizing the leadership of Black trans women, and being a part of activism in that way, especially the things that are currently happening here in New York, and um, just yeah. I would say like two people in general, or specifically, are Linda LaBeija and Charlene Incarnate. There was a conversation that I had watched recently with the two of them, and they talked about, as a queer, transgender, non-conforming, non-binary person, really like knowing yourself before you get into art making. Um, so yeah, definitely looking to different forms of leadership um, than I had been before. And then I had also mentioned this book to you that has been really grounding for me, called "The Body Keeps the Score."
Ooh.
Uh,
It's a thing object. It's
yeah,
been well loved, clearly.
has definitely got a lot of love. um, but thinking about connections between brain and body, the effect of mental health on the body, and I feel like this is something that we're all going to have to be thinking about now as we went through quarantine. Like, everybody's kind of being impacted in this very dramatic and intense way. Um, and so this book like really pulled together a lot of like what I've been thinking about over the past couple of years, because it was like in my own art making, I've always been interested in the body and thinking about comfort with your own body. Does your body feel like a safe, do you feel at home in your body? Does it feel like a safe place? And so as we went through quarantine, that just kind of like cemented all of the things that I was thinking about, because our safety is so jeopardized. Um, yeah.
And I feel like that's also like, I mean, to stick with the quarantine for a moment, it's like that idea of the body and do you feel comfortable in the body? Like, yes, it certainly is going to relate to issues around gender and issues around race and ethnicity, but also I feel like in this moment of quarantine, like when so many people can be carriers of this virus but be asymptomatic, or you know, different people are getting sick to different degrees. It's like that idea of being safe and comfortable in your body takes on yet another layer of questioning, I guess. So, but you also said like these things have really helped you kind of come to a better understanding and like reading and like listening to new and thinking about new forms of leadership. So do you feel like it sounds like you've actually kind of come through all of these moments of questioning recently with some new understanding coming out of it?
Yeah, I feel like I've gained a lot of answers during quarantine, and then also during this past month when the efforts of the Black Lives Matter movement have been amplified, and especially Black trans lives as well. That even though it's really hard to be navigating this moment, for me, I feel like, yeah, there's just been a lot of answers revealed. In particular, I think that's mostly because everything has slowed down. We're operating at a different pace, and I've really appreciated that's, you know, obviously like there's a lot of, you know, sadness right now and difficulty. But the one thing that I think I appreciate of this moment is that everything has slowed down. And I think we're all being like asked to sit with ourselves a little more. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's been interesting from my point of view, and I don't know if you've gone through like a similar up and down, um, but I feel like it's been interesting to watch over the different periods of quarantine, and then especially in the last month with the kind of Black Lives Matter uprising on top, that people have gone through phases of, you know, there's been talk about slowing down, or there's been talk about self-care, or there's been talk about amplifying other people's voices, like in ways that I don't think have been part of the broader conversation, or that I haven't seen as part of the broader conversation as much as they seem to have been in the last few months. I don't know if that feels accurate
Yeah.
to you, or already clued into more of those than I was, but
You know, there's definitely been different waves of, yeah, moments where I feel more ambitious, moments where I have to recognize, okay, you need to like take a few steps back, realize that maybe you can't accomplish as many things as you had hoped this week. That's okay. So yeah, I just feel like, you know, we're in this moment where we get to reinvent so much about the ways that we operate, the ways that we work. Yeah.
I feel like you're like one of the few people that I have heard like be able to kind of put words to that as something that has felt like comfort, or like you've come to new understandings, as opposed to just kind of staying in that uncertain, strange place of not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Which more power to you. I don't know that we've all been able to get there, but I'm glad that you are.
Well, I like that is one of the things of, for some people this isn't new.
Right.
Yeah, it's like,
So do you want to say, will you say more about that actually?
yeah, anybody who, you know, who has navigated the world with different intersecting marginalized identities, we've always been in this place of like trying to make our voices, concerns heard, and having to be our own systems of support and care. And I feel like the rest of the world is just catching on to what that means to, you know, to engage in mutual care that doesn't come from like you realizing that you can't always rely on the government or institutions or systems, that we can actually be our own forms of support.
And I feel like that's been like one of the kind of silver linings, if that is even a fair way to put it, for me at least, in the last month, where so many more people have been paying attention to the Black Lives Matter movement writ large, and then, you know, digging into issues around police funding and, you know, Black trans women, and, you know, all of these kind of related issues, seeing how many more white people are seeming to get involved has been a little bit of a like silver lining, I guess, to me, even if the situation writ large continues to be quite difficult and challenging and full of grief and sadness and anger. I have been thinking about that a lot, that I think like some of the conversations that we have had over the years that we've known each other, but also just like some of these alternative ways of knowing and alternative models of leadership and things where, as you're saying, it's like other people have been doing this and living in these places.
Yeah, we're coming full circle a little bit, like this idea of thinking of new leadership, thinking of new expertise. I think it's
and valuing different kinds of expertise kind of more evenly, or like raising up forms of expertise that should have been raised up before.
yeah.
So I guess I also wonder if, because the work that you're doing at Visual Aids and the kinds of programs that you're doing and just the ethos of that organization, the kind of baked in, like the activism involved in that, but also I guess just the idea of an organization that has, was founded out of, I don't know if it was like not the last major pandemic, but certainly a previous major disease, kind of making it through. I feel like there's lessons in there too of like how to survive a plague, to quote the the essay. But
I mean, at least here
has that been
for most of us, this is like the AIDS epidemic is the only thing that comes to recent memory. So yeah, definitely being in community with all of the people that are attached to visual aids and the knowledge that they have to share about, what it was like to have lived through the height of the AIDS epidemic and to have been like a long-term survivor. So to have been living with HIV for some people almost 30 years now, or 30 years plus. That just has been really grounding to learn from that community as well, and just the way that visual aids exist as it's like it is an institution, but it has this community sensibility to it that isn't always present in institutions.
Yeah, talk about different models of leadership. I feel like you've got, even just in kind of the working part of your life, I feel like you've been kind of working in very different models of how an organization could be run.
Yeah, and that as well. And then even the way that art is preserved and presented and shared feels, the organization was formed around, preserving the work of artists that were at a time when things were extremely dire. And I feel like that has, like, the way that the art is preserved and presented and shared with the community is just a very different model than a lot of institutions. It doesn't feel like it's clasped and held back from the world. It's like an open invitation. Come and explore our archives and sit with all of this and learn. Yeah.
And it's almost like go ahead.
Yeah, that was it.
It's interesting to think about like having like that specific lens that's kind of framing the mission of visual aids. It's like it helps almost kind of model new approaches or new models of leadership, or kind of present an alternative to some of the more like traditionally run kind of museum hierarchical structures, because it's got a narrower mission and a more specific focus. I don't know what that looks like on the side of being involved, but I feel like at least from the outside, it's like I can understand how that might kind of contribute to feeling more of this sense of like the mission being focused in a specific way and giving a sense of purpose along with it.
Yeah, no, that's something that like I think about a lot of like I don't know, like the specificity of it, how are we going to see more things popping up like visual aids that speak to like these experiences or leadership that can really help us move forward as a whole. Yeah,
it's like it makes me wonder what new organizations are starting up now, will be starting up in the coming months, like what will come out of kind of this moment. And especially if we still have many months of pandemic concerns ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's lots of people, you know, that are focused and emphasized on this thing of like just getting back to normal, but I think most of us know that the world is going to be different probably forever, or you know, this idea of like going back to normal isn't something that I think a lot of us can think about. So, you know, we have a lot of time to sit and think about new ways that we want to, like, you know, engage with this world and who we want to lead.
And I find it inspiring. Like, I think to be able to talk to someone like you who is seeing possibility out of that, or is coming to new understanding out of that, or feeling like this period of time is giving you some answers, is something that I think most people are not there. I don't know that I'm there. um, and I feel like that is kind of like the great thing that people are wrestling with right now. So many people that I've been talking to, it's like, even people who don't think of going back to what the old normal was. It's like nobody really knows what the new normal is going to be, or when or if we will get to a new normal. And so I think it's, at least to me, it's like helpful to hear that, like, for some people, it's like sitting in this space is actually providing you some positive, like, realizations, I guess, as opposed to just the anxiety of not knowing.
Yeah. I actually wanted to share a little bit from The Body Keeps the Score, because I think that there's just so much in it that, I mean, it helped me a lot, and I think it can, you know, I would recommend it to anybody who is thinking about like how to find comfort in this moment. And because I feel like if you can resolve that within your physical body, a lot of these other things will come forward, that you'll be able to like think more imaginatively. Yeah.
Please, whatever you would like to share.
um, so yeah, The Body Keeps the Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. It's by Bessel van der Kolk. And here's a short passage from it. A few years ago, I heard Jerome Kagan, a distinguished emeritus professor of child psychology at Harvard, say to the Dalai Lama that for every act of cruelty in this world, there are hundreds of small acts of kindness and connection. His conclusion, to be benevolent rather than malevolent, is probably a true feature of our species. Being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. Numerous studies of disaster response around the globe have shown that social support is the most powerful protection against being overwhelmed by stress and trauma. Social support is not the same as merely being in the presence of others. The critical issue is reciprocity, being truly heard and seen by the people around us, feeling that we are held in someone else's mind and heart. For our physiology to calm down, heal, and grow, we need a visceral feeling of safety. No doctor can write a prescription for friendship and love. These are complex and hard-earned capacities. You don't need a history of trauma to feel self-conscious and even panicked at a party with strangers, but trauma can turn the whole world into a gathering of aliens.
Ooh, the whole world into a gathering of aliens?
A gathering of aliens.
Gathering of aliens.
There's a lot
Ooh,
in it.
yeah.
Like, that last line I find so interesting, like, as somebody who's always been deeply interested in science fiction as well, and this idea of like, I mean, this goes back to, like, you know, the things that I was talking about with my own work and my own interest of, you know, comfort within one's body, and and that sense of alienation that can occur if you don't have comfort. But I think
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that like everybody now is like having to think about to some level.
Yeah. And that idea of visceral safety, or like that sense of kind of like a visceral knowing that you are comfortable or safe. Like that's not just being around people, it's on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I like the line that says social support is not the same as merely being in the presence of others. And I think that that's something that we're learning now is that, um, I mean, yeah, being on Instagram can be very overwhelming, being inundated with so much stuff, but then it can also, you know, um, seeing how much people are doing for others is also uplifting.
well, and that idea from the beginning of the passage that you read, that again, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but that people are benevolent more than malevolent, or
Yeah.
that there's like the tendency toward benevolence more than malevolence. Um, I feel like that's sort of, there are plenty of examples around of that right now that I think it's like worth everybody kind of focusing on those sometimes. It's very easy to be overwhelmed, as you said, on social media, or reading or listening to or watching too much news, or, you know, kind of taking in all of the naysaying and doom speaking that is happening right now. Um, but that reminder that there's this human kind of tendency toward benevolence instead of malevolence, I
Mm-hmm.
think also worth holding on to. Maybe that's actually a really nice place to wrap up. I mean, unless you had anything else you wanted to say, I feel like that's such a lovely set of ideas out of that passage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that maybe that's kind of a nice way to send people into their July 4th weekend. But do you want to say anything else before we go? Or if anybody has any comments or reflections, feel free to type them in the comments.
Um, yeah, I mean that I think that does feel like a good ending place as well. But yeah, I think it's just important that we're all sitting with ourselves and thinking about ourselves in connection to each other, and um, how we can continue to show up for one another, how we can also take care of ourselves so that we can continue to show up. Yeah.
Well, here's to continuing to take care of ourselves and show up for others and trying to be benevolent wherever we can.
Yes. So,
Okay. Thank you, Blake. Happy weekend to all of you. May you find some refreshment and inspiration and some nice time to sit with some ideas. Right.
bye.